I think maybe this was ideally the album I thought I was making with Electric Circus, where where you want to show a wide range of styles, but not appear to be too you know over eager or enthusiastic with it. Like it just sounds natural, and then by the third listen, I realized that you're covering so much territory. Like you go from, some shit it goes completely hardcore to, then you go Afrofuturist, then you do this 90s Riot Girls throwback thing, and then like with uh uh the last song, Before the Throne, like it's almost like if like you transport it back to an Alice Coltrane kind of outtake. And the thing was, like, I was hoping the song was going to be 17 minutes, like an Alice Coltrane song, and then it cuts off. And I'm like, what the fuck? But
That was one of my favorite ones on the album too. That's a hard ass.
Oh, thank you.
That's a hard way to close the album. That shit is
yeah,
dope.
it's goddamn. Can you tell me just from soup to nuts how you put it together? Because in my mind, it's so every song is so unique. I think if making it in real time, I wouldn't know how you would see it as cohesive, but yet together it feels cohesive. Can you just
I'm
describe to us the process of that?
I'm glad that it feels like one thing, and it felt like one thing to me because it was all driven by this obsession, and it was driven by this obsession with this building. I had been on a friend's board. It was a Pinterest board that she had. She's called Jamala Johns, and she's kind of a art curator. I think in the early days of Pinterest, it wasn't just like this is a cute hairstyle, but some people were using it like a magazine, So they were
Mm-hmm.
they were using they would put up a picture and then they would just write tons and tons. And she had this board called artists and their creatives and their workplaces. So she had Kara Walker arranging her silhouettes. She had Picasso painting with light, and she had this photograph of this artist, this black artist, contemporary artist, this man. And he was sort of staring out of the frame with this peaceful, sort of bold expression. And behind him was this weird contemporary art that I didn't understand. A pile of bricks on the floor, this
Mm-hmm.
shaggy goat. Instead of legs, it was had these spindles, and it was going around on a circular track. And then there was a big shop for a big sign for a shop, Harold's Chicken Shop in Chicago, with like a chef chasing after a chicken with a meat cleaver. And he
Very
was just
familiar.
looking out, like he was represented by a white cube, and he was looking at the frame like, yeah, this is my art, you know. And I
Right.
thought, who is this? I don't know contemporary art. Who is this man specifically? Who is this black man who's not working in figurative art, right? It's not paintings of people, it's not drawings of people, it's not photographs, it's this stuff. And I found out he was called Theaster Gates. And then when I did some research, I found out that part of his practice is saving these buildings on the south side of Chicago. He lives in the south side of Chicago. He's watched many buildings just get torn down by the city, On Stony Island, where this building is, used to have big theatres, really important theatres for black music. And just over the years, they've been torn down one by one. So, I mean, Chicago's architectural masterpieces. But then when you get to the south side, there's these holes, there's these gaps, and it's a kind of erasure of the history of the place and of the presence, the black presence in the place. And so he saw this bank, it's a 100-year-old bank, and it had been slated for demolition for a long time. It's going to be pulled down by the city. The
Mm-hmm.
basement was underwater, but it's this beautiful bank with these columns outside, and it's like a big square, sort of Greco-Roman building on Stony Island. And he decided he was going to save it, and so he bought it for $1 from the government, and he saved $4 million by selling his own art to transform this bank. So it doesn't have art in anymore. It doesn't have any money in.
Mm-hmm.
He's saved it by filling it with art archives and historical archives. So it has 26,000 books that were given to the Johnson Publishing Company, submitted to the Johnson Publishing Company, who made Ebony Magazine, Jet Magazine, the Negro Digest.
Mm-hmm.
So from 1943, if you wrote a book in anything to do with black space, architecture, politics, dance, entertainment, recipe books, yearbooks, if you wrote PhDs and you wanted the Johnsons to review it and include it in their publication, you would send it to the Johnsons. So 26,000 of these books, you know, some of them we know and they're familiar, some of them super rare books.
Mm-hmm.
It's got those. It's got all of Frankie Knuckles' records in. So when Frankie Knuckles passed away, his entire record collection was given to the Stony Island Arts Bank. And it also has upstairs on the second floor these problematic objects from America's past. The mammy jars, the postcards depicting racial violence, newspaper articles since the 1800s, advertising, copy, signage, objects for the home, ephemera, photographs that were collected by this black and Chinese banker called Ed Williams, who would go to these yard sales and flea markets and see these objects and think, you know, who's collecting these things? Who wants to continue to have these things in the home? So he would buy them to take them out of circulation and put them in boxes in his house. And once he had amassed 40,000 of these objects, his kids were like, Dad, can we get, it's kind of intense to be around this stuff. Can we get this out of the house? So he donated it to the Rebuild Foundation. So the arts bank is contemporary art on the walls. It has exhibitions. Then it's these historic objects, the Frankie Knuckles. It's all the slides from the University of Chicago, the glass slides from when people give talks. So, you know, all of history that had been photographed for the University of Chicago. And then these 26,000 books. So when I saw the work that Theaster was doing, I thought, I want to get in that bank. I just want to be there. I just want to look around. And we managed to connect with him. I was on tour. He came to the show. He met up with me afterwards, and I was just like, I'm so excited to meet you because you're a visual artist, because you also have a band called the Black Monks of Mississippi, because you're a ceramicist, which I love ceramics, because he trained in Japan, and because he's collecting these objects, and because he's saving all these buildings in the south side of Chicago. So he has a social practice. I was really excited to meet him. And I said, I really wish we'd come to the bank, but I'm leaving town at like 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. And he said, I'm also leaving town tomorrow because I'm going to President Obama's 50th birthday party. And I was like, oh, okay, this is who this guy is. So we opened the bank early for us, and I went to it. And once I opened those doors, I was just sort of blown away by the building, the size of the building, the library, the double height cube, just the amount of stuff, you know, every single drawer you opened is like songs from slavery times, newspapers, curling newspapers from 1840s, print adverts from the 30s, tins of beauty products, you know, just stuff, and every corner and just the arrangement of it. And Theaster said, oh, you know, you have to do a show in here. And straight away I sort of flashed on the music that I had made to this point and felt like this is a new vessel. Nothing that I have made sort of fits in this space. It's a different kind of response that's needed. But then when I left, all I could think about was the things that I'd seen. You know, he had this sculpture in the corner, and I said, oh, who did that? And he said, it's one of mine. And it looked like it had been made from wood that had maybe had the paint stripped off. There was a certain amount of violence to it. And I said, oh, you know, what is it? And he said, it's a sculpture I made. It's from the floorboards from an abandoned police station in Chicago. And as soon as he said that, I immediately was thinking about the floorboards. What have the floorboards seen? You know, so often in history, the objects are the witnesses to what has happened. They're the things that can't speak, but they're the things that see everything. The floor in the police station, the telephone in the police station, the car, the rearview mirror, they're the things that really are holding the truth. And so when I was on tour, you know, I mean, my head was in the tour, but at the same time, I'd be lying on my tour bus bed and I'd be just writing poems about things that I'd seen. You know, I wrote this poem called You Who Have Walked These Floors in Fear. I was thinking about this floorboard. It was after the death of Sandra Bland. So I was thinking about, you know, who knows truth? In some cases, it's a person. In some cases, that person is unwilling to express what has really happened in the situation. But all the physical objects, they know. And I just thought, I want to get back to that bank. I want to open more drawers. I want to touch more stuff. And every time I touched something, I felt like it was it's old stuff, but it's fizzing with a kind of contemporary, real life things happening in the molecules story. So really, with the writing of the record, you know, I went back for a 2-week residency. We stayed in the south side of Chicago. I mean, I'm from the UK, but you guys know Chicago. Chicago has its huge challenges, you know.
Oh, we know.
Yeah. So that was an eye opener. You know, we didn't have a car there, and we said, "Oh, we'll just, you know, we're staying so nearby. We'll just walk around." They're like, "Oh
What?
no, you can't walk around. You can't walk around." You know, so we walked to the place where we hid the car, and on a bus shelter there was an advert for what you could do if you wanted to needed to give up your child in the first 30 days of its life. You know, it was a list of things. It said all you need to do is wrap it in a clean towel. It has to be in the first 30 days of its life. You could take it to a fire
Fire
station, or you
station,
could
yeah.
drop it at this particular school or that particular hospital. You can give information, or you can have no questions asked. And it was particularly poignant that it was at a bus shelter, because of course that's where so many children that couldn't be looked after have been left by parents that couldn't look after their children. So,
Right.
you know, just sort of walking, I thought, this is what this area is. And I thought about the importance of a building like this, which talks about the history of the area, and just about the history of the people, and how the situation is as it is now, and it hasn't always been the way it is, and it won't always be the way it is, but how art is a place of, it's a new space, it's a physical space, it's a place where people have the opportunity to imagine something different. So I was there for 2 weeks. I wrote some songs there. I was home. I was back and forth. I mean, this record was sort of 7 years coming together, you know. So sometimes I was making music in the place. We set up a studio in one of the buildings next to the bank, and all the songs on the record are inspired by particular objects in the bank, or groups of objects or events in the bank. And that to me was my sort of golden thread when I was making it. And then to me, whatever the style was, it didn't matter. It just, this, whatever the music was, it just kind of bounced off the object. So it's all about the objects, and the tight remit was it has to be in response to these objects. And it just became my obsession. I felt like everywhere I looked, there was a story or a photo or something about Chicago, something about the South Side.
So,
Wow.
what comes to you first? Do the words come first, or does the music come first? Because there's some songs in which uh the he will follow me with his eyes, in
Yeah.
which, like, specifically melodically, and your words are dependent on whatever chords being played, and it's not a circular song that it's looping. It's just kind of going linear into, and it morphs into a whole nother song by the end of
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah.
like, what comes first for you? Like, are the words hitting you first, and then you find music to it, or does the music come first?
I think in that situation, in He Will Follow You with His Eyes, I had found this tin of a beauty product. It was by this company called Valmore, and it was set up in Chicago in 1926. And all the illustrations I found to be really beautiful, really elegant. And they were done by this black artist called Charles Dawson, who was a very, you know, well-known artist in his time.
Mhm.
And they were elegant and they were beautiful. And there was also all this romance surrounding Valmore, you know, the copy in the adverts. So
Yes.
if you saw an advert for Valmore, it might say things like, "His eyes will follow you across the room," or the perfume. The perfumes were called things like "Follow Me, Boy," or "Look Me Over." Everything had this romance and this glamour. So I was kind of interested. I was like, "What's this beauty? You know, what's this company?" And I found out that it was sold door to door. You know, so like Avon, they would knock on the door with this big basket of stuff. And I found out they was targeted mostly at black men and women. But of course, the era, I'm looking through the products, there's lots of perfumes, there's lots of moisturizers and shampoos and stuff. But there's a lot of hair straightening products, skin lightening products, you know, white rose, cold cream, and, you know, work
Ambi.
straight away. The adverts would say things
Ambi.
like, "Don't you want to help yourself to love and happiness?" You know, all of this is just away from you if you don't just if you take your skin a few shades lighter, just
That's why
gonna,
you ran at the end. Okay.
yeah.
I was going to say, because upon first listening, I was like, I was like, wow, this might be her best vocal performance because.
Oh,
And then the second time, I was like, oh, maybe she's singing in a character. And then I realized by the end, I mean, I don't know if it's more of an angry rant or more just a defiant thing about it, but I realized that that must be the story. I didn't know the history behind the song, but
yeah. In the
I
first
I
half of
love
the
the way that you
song,
sing in character in the beginning,
oh,
and
thanks. Yeah,
yeah,
I wanted to get into that sort of 50s space, and I was thinking about
yeah,
50s medicated domestic femininity in America. Okay, so it's like you've got all the things you meant to need. You've got your vacuum cleaner, and you've got your washing machine, you've got your refrigerator. So as a woman, your life is not difficult anymore. You know, you've got these appliances, and you shouldn't complain. And you're in the home, and if things feel difficult, there's always a tablet you can take from the doctors just to take the edge off things. And then, but then, you know, imagining someone coming to your door with these products, there's a kind of femininity is already this narrow, and then for black women it's even more narrow because the beauty's white aligned at this point, you know, so
mm-hmm.
you got to do all the women stuff, and then you've got to do the stuff to make your natural self augmented to be accepted. And so in the first half of the song, the person is definitely under the spell of
Right.
Valmore. I did that. I wrote that song in the bank, and I played it on guitar. You know, I sort of do my best on my guitar. Like I'm not a trained guitarist, but I wanted to make it sort of, you know, 50s and dreamlike, like those kind of chords that would be
Mm-hmm.
in, you know, those movies that start where the car's winding round the side of a mountain or whatever,
Yeah,
the open top car, and it's like there's the glamour, and then halfway through I wanted to have this kind of sonic arresting, you
yeah.
know. So when I first wrote that, that was just like me playing one string, dum dum dum, you know, my plum red lipstick, my black hair kinking, my black skin gleaming. You know, I wanted it to be, as you say, sort of defiant. You know, I don't, it says at the end, I don't want to leave myself behind, vanishing into a girl I don't recognize. And when after, you know, because the record took me a long time, so one time I was listening to vocal, I was like, I feel like I could bring more character into this. You know, I was thinking of like a Eartha Kitt, you know, with her
Mm-hmm.
incredible diction and poise and the movement of the words and everything so dramatic and elegant and
In,
controlled. And I wanted to bring some in.
so in my excitement, I was making a quiet sleep playlist the day that the album came out. And so, not even thinking about it, I just rushed that on the list. The person went to sleep.
Yeah, big
Then you
mistake.
wake up.
It was like, what the hell, Ahmir? And I was like, huh? And I was like, oh, I forgot that sometimes codas, and because, you know, in my mind, when you're listening to it, I'm thinking like, okay, might have a new ID track and that's the next song. I didn't realize it was the same song until that person told me, like, dog, you woke us up in the middle of the night. Like,
Yeah,
it was, it wasn't that.
it wasn't what you thought. Yeah, it's the worst record for DJs. But I always think my stuff's a bit like that anyway, sort of like it's bumpy, like you're just getting into one thing and then there's another thing. And I don't know, that's
Nah,
my background. It's like I was a classically trained violinist, and then I was in an indie band when I was 15. That was a music that I loved. You know, I had grown up with soul music, but indie was like my thing that I found, you know, Veruca Salt and L7 and Belly, and I guess I liked, you know, women in that music. I like seeing women play guitars, and I don't know, they weren't shaving their armpits or they weren't having to wear a certain thing. They're just wearing t-shirts and a jeans and they're just
right.
doing their thing. And there was a lot of freedom in that.